He's a chef. It's corny and cheesy and heartwarming in all of the best possible ways. Oh, after that, I finally did it. Hello, my little raindrops. Welcome back or welcome home. My name is Desiree. It is so nice to have you here. I have my little avocado heating pouch that I'm just gonna, my books all dropped, that I'm just gonna keep right here because it is so cold in my bedroom right now. So let's just ignore the avocado, okay? Welcome to my monthly wrap up for February. I read a lot of books in February. I am genuinely shocked at how many and how fast I read all of them, but it's gonna be interesting. So overall, I think I read 14 books in February. Yeah, I did. I read 14 books in February. Now let me pull up my sheet rating thing. So, 14 books in February. It was a really fun month. I finally read Shatter Me. That's exciting. I'm just gonna hop right into it. And, oh, I also entered my Kindle girly era this month, because I went to Toronto in mid-February and I brought my Kindle just in case I wanted to read on my Kindle while I was on the plane. I ended up really liking it. I still am forever and always a physical book reader, but I do really appreciate having the option of having my Kindle with me. And I read 2 books on my Kindle this month. And I read 1 book on Fable, which I am so excited to talk to you guys about that book. We're gonna talk about that once I actually get there. So that's that. And I also made a TBR jar. And I made this just a few days ago. I actually posted a video of me making the TBR jar and realizing that I have 183 books at my apartment. So if you want to watch that, I will put it up here somewhere. But we're gonna hop right into it. I've brought water because, as always, I'm gonna be talking for a while. The first book I read in February was Something More, and this is an advanced reader's copy that I was sent by the publishers. Jackie had been looking for ARC readers that were like a very specific niche. One of those niches were Canadians, and of course, as I am Canadian, I thought I would give my name, and I was lucky enough to receive an ARC. And this book just gave me the warmest of feelings. It is a young adult romance. I don't know exactly how to describe it, but it's a really, really funny, cozy, heartwarming story about a girl who falls in love. About a teenage girl who is just a teenage girl. But there's also a whole lot more to it. I'll read you the back since I can't really talk about this too much because it's not released yet. It's going to be releasing on June 6th this year, so I can't talk too much about it, but I can read you the blurb. So 15-year-old Jessie, a quirky loner obsessed with the 90s, is diagnosed as autistic just weeks before starting high school. Determined to make a fresh start and keep her diagnosis a secret, Jessie creates a list of goals that range from acquiring 2 distinct eyebrows to getting a magical first kiss and landing a spot in the school play. Within the halls of Holy Trinity High, she finds a world where things are no longer black and white and quickly learns that living in a color is much more fun. But Jessie gets more than she bargained for when 2 very different boys steal her heart, forcing her to go off script. Now, if you like Lynn Painter, I feel like you would just eat this up. When I read a YA romance by Lynn, I gobble that stuff up so fast, and it's corny and cheesy and heartwarming in all of the best possible ways, and it's very high school, right? I saw myself in Jessie in certain aspects of her personality, like the way that she fell in love with so many guys just because they held eye contact. Like that was me in high school. It was just really good, and it's not necessarily like a bad love triangle that will get you like too torn between the two, but it's still a really interesting love triangle to go through. And Jessie also comes to know herself better through these relationships. It's a great, light and funny YA romance, but it's also got a really nice lesson and a really nice message by the end of the book. And Jessie's character is in fact based on the own experiences of the author herself. So we get that little touch of authenticity throughout the story. I will recommend it forever and ever. I think I read this in less than 24 hours. I didn't read it in one sitting because I haven't really had the time to read a book in one sitting in a very long time. I guess you could compare this to The Princess Diaries. The very first movie, when Mia is, I can't remember that guy's name, but the guy that she crushes on at the beginning of the movie, you know, like the really popular guy with really shiny hair and obnoxious personality. The love triangle that you have in Princess Diaries between Mia, that dude, and Michael. Like, I know it's not necessarily a love triangle because Michael just keeps on the sidelines throughout most of the movie. It gave off that vibe. Obviously there's not royalty, but it is that very high school, girl falls in love with boy, boy falls in love with girl type of situation, and it's heartwarming. I really liked it. How many stars? 5 stars for this. It made me really happy. And I know that I would reread certain parts of it just to get that bit of comfort that I got from reading this first. So that was the first book I read. And then after that, I was just like on a romance streak. Honestly, I am almost always on a romance streak, but let's just... So my next one was The Cheat Sheet by Sarah Adams. I've had this book for a while, and I missed Sarah's really funny, cozy rom-coms. So I decided to read this, and I love it so much. It is insta love, which, you know, it's not usually my thing, but the way that Sarah writes this is just, oh, I really liked it. This is best friends to lovers. They have been best friends since high school, and they've been in love with each other since high school. So if that's not your thing, you know, like when you start the book and you see that both characters are in love with each other, and it takes like almost all of the book for them to actually confess and realize they've been in love with each other all that time, blah blah blah. If that's not your thing, I can totally understand where you're coming from. But it's so funny, and it's very squeal worthy. Like, it'll have you kicking your feet up and down in the air, and I love it so much. Bree is a ballerina. She was in an accident though before she went off to college. She was supposed to go to Juilliard. Because of that accident she wasn't able to, but now she teaches ballet classes. She has her studio above a pizzeria, and then her best friend Nathan is like this super famous football player, and these two are just like, they are like this. They have to fake date. So we have the fake dating trope in here. Oh my god, it was so cute. I cackled so much. I can't get over it. I want to read every single one of Sarah's books because her writing is just, it's like a cozy hug. It's hilarious, it's sweet, but there's also a scene in here that got me pretty emotional because there's an anxiety/panic attack, and I related to that so much. Started bawling my eyes out, really. But it is so good, and it's a very light read. I don't necessarily want to say that it's a palate cleanser. It can be, depending on the reader, right, and what you just read before and what you're hoping to read after. It's very sweet and light, so this would be perfect after reading something that's a little heavier. And I gave this 5 stars. Again, this is one of my comfort reads for sure. 5 stars. Okay, after this, I have a lot of 5 stars this month, and I swear to you, I really took the time to think, is this really a 5 stars? Or should I be more harsh? Should I think this through a little bit more? I swear to you, these are my most genuine ratings. I'm saying this because I've been told that I'm a little bit too easy on my ratings. I promise, I really took the time to think things through. But the next book I read is Juniper Hill by Daphne Perry. I read Indigo Ridge back in January, and I am now positively obsessed with the series. I also apparently had a thing for books with green at the start of the month, but I read this and I just love how Daphne kind of writes these really heartwarming romances, but adds like an element of mystery or twist to it. So this has the single parent trope. It's grumpy sunshine, forced proximity. Basically, Memphis arrives in Quincy, which is the town this series is set in. She just had her baby boy a few weeks ago. A few weeks or a few months ago. She's running away from home. She came from a very rich family. They were not the best, and her boy's father, that's a whole thing. Like, no one knows who he is. You'll see throughout the story who he is, where he comes from, the whole shebang. And she finds a job working as a cleaning lady at VLLO's Inn, which is the hotel that belongs to the Edens. And so she can go there, but she can't find a place to stay. And so Eloise, who manages and runs the hotel, which is also in Eden in the series, she's like, no, I absolutely need you. You can live at the top of my brother's garage. Knox. So Knox Eden. So he is the chef at Knuckles, which is the restaurant that is connected to the Eloise Inn. He's a chef. He is a grump, but he also is such a softie for Memphis. And he also has like this kind of traumatic past that affects the potential relationship he could have with Memphis until he addresses it. There's communication in here. I feel like Devney, like, I've only read 3 of her books so far, but there's always communication. Okay, when I say always, there's always communication. It might not be the best of communication, but it's not just like they have an argument and they run opposite ways and then they don't talk for a week and then they realize they messed up and yada yada yada. They have an argument and then they talk about it right after the argument. They figure it out, which I love. Look, the miscommunication trope, I can look past it. If the writing is good, if the plot is good, if the ending is good, you know, I can look past it. But when it's... That's hilarious because we're going to talk about this very soon. But in here, there's communication, there's tension, there's like instant chemistry, but they don't want to get together because he has issues from his past affecting him right now. She doesn't want a relationship, but there's obvious chemistry and attraction, and at some point they just give in. Knox is so sweet with Memphis's boy. This is adorable. And then the epilogue at the end, just, I cried. Oh, I cried. It's so sweet. It is so sweet. And again, there's this element of mystery and intrigue and like that little bit of action, like about here or so. I'm not gonna tell you because it's not in the blurb, but oh my god, was I ever sitting at the edge of my seat. It was an emotional roller coaster. But I rated this 5 stars. I would reread it all over again. I love Knox so much. I have a thing when it's I talked about this in my book haul when was it when I got this? Can't remember. I remember that in one of my videos I talked about how much I love the movie No Reservations, which is like it's a movie set in a restaurant, and I just love when there's the element of, you know, like being in a kitchen or one of the main characters being a chef. I love it in books too so much. So to have Knox being the chef of his own restaurant, that was just like, obviously, chef's kiss. After that, what did I read? Oh, after that, I finally did it. I finally did it, and boy oh boy did I ever love it. Can you see the tabs? This surpassed my expectations, and now the only downside is that part of my career is on TikTok, right? So I've seen the edits. I've seen the reviews. I've seen people losing it over Aaron Warner. And so it did affect my reading experience because I knew stuff before it happened. And not necessarily because I saw specific spoilers, just because I saw certain things on social media that allowed me to come to the conclusion that, okay, this is what's going to happen. But nevertheless, I loved this. And I know a lot of people say that the first one was not good or wasn't as good as the others. Still devoured it. There's a thing about dystopian books that just gets to me. And I'd especially been missing like dystopia. I'd been missing The Hunger Games and Divergent and Maze Runner and all of those really good dystopian stories. I'd been missing them so much. And so reading this was just like I was giving in to that craving for dystopia. I guess I could explain what it is for those of you who don't know. If you're on BookTube, I doubt you've never seen this. If you haven't, look at it, buy the entire series right now. Because I finished reading it, I ran to Chapters and bought the whole box set. But basically, Juliet is this girl. We're like post-apocalyptic situation here. It's dystopian, right? And she's in a psych ward. She's been locked up in there for about a year now, and she got locked up in there because her touch is fatal. Anyone that she touches, like, they don't necessarily die instantly, but when she touches them, she sucks out their life. And so something happens really bad. She gets locked up. The reestablishment has plans for her. And then we meet Aaron Warner. And I know, like, Adam in here, I like him. I like him a lot. But I still like Warner more. What does that say about me? Like, he was a jerk in here, but I still like him more. So I don't know what that says about me. We're just gonna ignore that. This was so good. I rated it 4.5 stars just because the beginning is a little slow to get into. That's part of why some people say the others are better and the first one is kind of meh. I really liked it. There was some fun action going in there. There was some plot twists. There was some really good romance. There was just, I don't know, great development. I loved it. I loved it, and I cannot wait to keep reading the series. However, thing is now, I promised myself I was going to keep using my TBR jar as much as possible. I'm gonna keep using the TBR jar until I either pick out one of the books in the series or that I have such a huge craving to keep going that I just ditch the jar and read the next book. Because I am the kind of person that takes breaks in between, but I don't think I'm going to take too big of a break for this series just because it's so good. I like to stretch it out and make it last as long as possible, so that is what I do. After that, I was in a slump. I'm going to be honest with you. I think I started 3 different books and they were not it for me. And when I say started, I read like the first chapter and I was just like, okay, no, I'm not in the mood for this right now. I'm going to read something else. Does that count as DNF? I don't think it does, because I only read the first chapter. That doesn't count. Oh, I will have to talk about, okay, I'll mention this right now. One of my book clubs and I, the book of the month for February was The Man I Never Met by L. Cook. I read up to chapter 9 and it got sad and I just could not continue because I was not like in the right place to be reading a sad book and I just haven't gotten back into it yet. So I unfortunately have not read my own book club book, which is embarrassing. I'm so sorry. I physically could not flip the page. I was not mentally stable enough for that. But I guess that counts as DNF, does it? Probably. But I will get back into it eventually when I'm more mentally stable. But I guess that's a book I did not finish in February. I don't know. I don't really DNF books. And if I do, I don't really consider them DNF. I just consider them like they're on pause. Like it's a pause. It's not a did not finish. It's just I hit pause. Anyways, but after Shatter Me, I just felt like I needed to read a romance that was hilarious and that could get me out of whatever slump I was in. So I read a Christina Lauren book. And I read Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating. This book for me is the perfect example of a palate cleanser. I don't think I will ever reread this again, but at the time that I read it, it was perfect. It was exactly what I needed. It was sweet, it was funny. They went to college together. She really admired him because he was smart. And then they meet, they become best friends almost instantly. And they start going out on double dates. Not as with them as a couple, they go on double dates with other people. Then they slowly start to realize that they're falling for each other. Okay, spoiler! There's a trope in here that a lot of people don't like, and I'm not a fan of it. Not when it's written in this way. When it's written in this way, I don't like this trope. Spoiler, I will tell you what trope it is. It's the pregnancy trope. I can look past it when I know it's gonna happen. I can't really look past it when it's like you read 3/4 of the book, there's an event that makes it very obvious that she's gonna get pregnant, and then she's pregnant. It's not my jam. Like, not at the end of the book. You know, I don't yuck people's yums, as one would say, and I don't knock it till I try it. But I tried it. No, you know, like, it was fine. It just kind of, was that necessary, you know? But it was a great palate cleanser. I loved it. Sweet, funny, cute, heartwarming. It was still good. Not a favorite. I will not reread it. I rated it 3.5 stars. So I guess that for me, a 3.5 star is a book that was perfect at the time I was reading it, but not a book that I would reread. After that, I read a novella. This is again in the Edens series, but it doesn't follow any of the Edens. If you've read Indigo Ridge and Juniper Hill, there's this baker that comes to the Eloise Inn, and she gives Knox her cinnamon bun recipe. This is her story. It's Cleo Hillcrest. So she's the daughter of a really, really famous man, and so like she has bodyguards, and she decides to go on a vacation to Quincy during Christmas because she wants to escape all the family drama that goes on at Christmas. And she doesn't tell her dad, she doesn't tell anyone, she just goes. And she gets there, one of her dad's, like the head bodyguard, shows up. So she's had a crush on him for a while. He's had a huge crush on her for a while. Neither of them know because they both act like they hate each other. He ends up staying in Quincy with her. It's basically 133 pages of you laugh, you cry, you cackle, you swoon, and you blush. It's great. I love having this. They're not one of the main characters in this series, but I still really like to have their story because Cleo is mentioned a couple times in the first 2 books. And this was it was super easy to read. Not something I would read again, but I rated this 4 stars. It was good writing for a novella. Kept me hooked the entire time. I was totally invested. I ate this up. But it's not necessarily something I would reread, but I would reread sections of it just to get that little giddy feeling, if that makes sense. And then after that, I went back to my copy of Shatter Me and I read Warner's novella, which isn't it Destroy Me? And I did record a read with me for this, which I will put up here as well as in the description. Yeah, Destroy Me. So at the end here, this is the entire novella. I will probably end up buying the physical book just because I feel like this series is going to be one of my absolute favorites and I will want to have the physical book. But it was so great to see Warner's point of view. That man is so smitten with Juliet and I am all here for it. And he is traumatized. Like, he had a really rough childhood and he is still having a rough life in general. Like, his dad sucks. But I rated it 4 stars. Again, a really good story. Kept my attention the entire time. I love Warner so much. I just loved having his point of view. And I would definitely reread parts of it. Not the entire thing, but parts of it. So, 4 stars for the novella. And then after that, I felt like reading some manga. And Lovesick Ellie volume number 8 came out on February 7th. So, obviously, had to grab it and read it. So I won't tell you what happens in volume 8 because it's volume 8, but basically Lovesick Ellie is the typical high school romance manga. She's not popular, he is, but he's kind of rude in reality, and so she gets to see the real him, she still loves him, yada yada yada. They fall in love, they start dating. The girls go crazy at school because you can't do that, you can't take him from us, you know, the very typical high school romance shoujo manga. I love it. I love it so much. I'm really invested in their story. 5 stars. The first and only Infinity Star read for the month. And that is Do I Know You? Now, I've seen a lot of reviews of people saying that this is just... I mean, I get where they're coming from, but again, it depends on the background of the reader and how they read the book. It all affects the rating. But basically, this is a second chance romance between a married couple. Eliza and Graham are going away for their 5-year wedding anniversary. But things have not been the same for quite some time. They feel completely detached from one another. They don't really feel like they know each other anymore. They still really love one another, but they can't really show it, and they're having a hard time like keeping the marriage alive. So Graham's parents pays for this trip for them for their anniversary, but still kind of trying to get them to spend some time together. And so when they get there, there was a mix-up and they booked 2 separate rooms. So they decide to stay each in a separate room, which, you know, that's a bit like, what? But then they start playing a game where they don't know each other. They act like they don't know each other. So when they meet at a bar, they start flirting and then they start interacting like they just met on vacation. So they fall into this kind of play of like faking that they're not married. and so on and so on. And so I really get what people mean by you're married, just talk it out. But I also kind of like this idea, like the excitement of creating a persona and getting to know the person you love all over again. I get where they're coming from. There are a lot of quotes in this book about how it can happen that you feel like you don't even know the person that you share a bed with every single night. To see how they struggled with their relationship while still really loving each other, but not really knowing how to have this conversation about what's going on with us, because Graham was having some issues with himself. He was having issues with self-confidence and self-image and all of that. And then Eliza was just also struggling, not in the same way as he was, but in her own way. Both were struggling and just didn't know how to communicate. And yes, I was a bit frustrated at times when they didn't just talk it out, but I mean, this is a book, right? It's a book that I was able to escape in and just fall in love with this story about a married couple who fake that they don't know each other, create fake personas, and fall in love with each other all over again. I just ate it right up. It was so good, and I would reread this entire thing without a second thought whatsoever. I would reread the entire thing. So obviously it has to be an infinity star. And the way that these characters grow and change, it's just... I don't know, I really, really liked it. I was not expecting to like it as much because I read The Roughest Draft by Emily Wibberley and Austin Sigmund Broca last year. Yeah. And it was still really good. Not one of my favorites and not a book I would necessarily reread. But this, I feel like the plot is it's so good. I couldn't stop reading it. I really like how they create these fake personas and just get to fall in love with each other all over again. Like, isn't it exciting to think that you're going on a trip with the person you love and things have been a little bit dull, or they've been a little bit out of place, or you feel like you don't know each other all that well anymore? Because if you've been together for so long, shouldn't you know what their favorite meal is? I know that line of questioning, and things change, right? It's not because you've been together for so long that you just stop asking those basic nice to meet you questions. You can keep asking them 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20, 50, 30, whatever years later. You can keep asking them because things change, people change, they grow, they evolve. The answers are not always going to be the same. Some might be, most won't. So that's one lesson that this book really shows you, and it's so good. I love it so much. And I absolutely understand that this is not a book for everyone. It might be slow, you might find it boring, you might find it like useless, like why can't you just communicate? But it's the entire plot of the book. So if they communicated at the very beginning, we would not have this book. So I guess go in with that mindset. But it was so good. And then after that, I read a book while I was in Toronto, and I read that on my Kindle. It is The Perfect Marriage. And now this book, it was like $2, so I just took it to read it on the plane. I'm not usually one to read a lot of mystery or thrillers, but when there's like that little bit of romance twisted in it, I always get intrigued. And so The Perfect Marriage is the story of how this married couple, they've been married for 10 years, he's been cheating on her for about a year and a half, and then one day he gets arrested because his mistress is found murdered in their bed at their like cabin, cottage house, whatever. And so he's the first suspect. And so his wife, who is a really good lawyer, ends up having to defend him. And so throughout the entire book, you're here questioning, like, did he really do it? Who could have done it? Because there are a lot of, like, potential suspects. And then you get to the end, and you're just like, what the actual heck? Like, it is, like, for me, I found it cliche, but I did not see it coming. Does that make sense? I gave this 4 stars. I took out a star because the writing did not really resonate with me. Like, it's just a book that you sit down and get through. Like, it's not a book I would have annotated, so I'm glad I read it on my Kindle. You read it for the thrill of it, for the thrill of like, oh my god, what happened? Who killed her? Who did it? Is it them? You start having theories, and then you're proven wrong, and then you're like, oh my god, I was so wrong to think that. And then a few chapters later, you're like, wait, was I totally wrong? Could it have been them? It just, you are at the edge of your seat throughout like the entire book. So I still gave it 4 stars, even though the writing was a little bit like meh to me, but the story was really good. After that, I read another book on my Kindle, which was Evidence of the Affair by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I've never read anything by Taylor until this book. I still have not read The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I promise you I will soon. I promise. But this was a novella, super short. Basically, it's written in like a correspondence format. This woman finds out that her husband has been cheating on her, and she writes to his mistress's husband to tell him of the affair. And so these two start corresponding, and they eventually become really close friends. And they do meet, but we don't get their actual interaction in person. They write about it in letters. So the entire novella is just them exchanging letters, and it's a very bittersweet type of story. I found it was a really good novella, not something I would have annotated, so I rated it 4 stars. But I still loved to see how these two complete strangers became incredibly close through letters, and how such an unfortunate event brought them together and got them to become incredibly close. I really liked that. And I also really liked Taylor's writing style, so I will be reading one of her books very soon. I'm actually planning on reading Daisy Jones and the Six once I finish my current read, because the series is coming out on Friday. I have no idea if I'll be able to finish it before then. I will try. I don't think I'll be able to, but it's fine. After that, I read the Tabby's Annotating Book Club book, which was Secretly Yours by Tessa Bailey. So, first off, this is an insta attraction, insta love between a grump and literally the most sunshine character I've ever met. Hallie is a florist in a small town, and Julian is a professor out of the small town, but he does come from there, so he's a huge grump. He struggles with really bad anxiety. It's very interesting to see how he struggles with it, and how he copes with it, which is obsessing over time and organization and scheduling, which I absolutely relate to. I felt so seen through Julian's character, which is the first time that I relate so much to the male main character and not the FMC. I mean, I'm not exactly like him, but I am like him to a certain degree. The tension between these two, the attraction, because it's basically Hallie and Julian had an almost kiss back when they were in high school, and it was an almost kiss, so obviously they did not kiss. So she'd had a crush on him for so long, and she was so excited, like, oh my god, he's gonna kiss me. He doesn't. They meet again many years later, and he doesn't necessarily remember her, but he is kind of obsessed with her. He really reminds me of Brandon in Happened One Summer. He's just so obsessed with making her happy. He feels like they're so drastically different that a relationship between them would just inevitably end in disaster. So he doesn't give in to his attraction and feelings for her until a very late point in the book. But after a wine-fueled girls' night, Hallie writes him a secret admirer letter. And so he finds it, and he's falling for Hallie, but then he's really feeling connected to whoever writes these letters, and he's secretly hoping it is Hallie. It is Hallie, but that's a whole thing. And I rated this 3.75. And now let's talk about why I reduced all those counts. I would not reread this because it's just not necessarily a book I would reread, and that's not a bad thing, okay? It's just, it wasn't like a spectacular romance that made me feel a bazillion things. So that's, for me, that's 1 star down. And then the 0.25 that I took out is just because I had a bit of a hard time keeping up with it. Like it wasn't the kind of book that I started reading and I couldn't put down. But I really enjoyed the story. I loved the way that Julian was obsessed with Hallie. It was just so sweet. The spice was great, of course, it's Tessa, you know. But I just didn't really feel that connection to the book itself. Yeah, I did see myself in the characters, but I didn't really have that connection with the book that made me like, oh, this is a 5 stars. I still recommend it, okay? For me, a 3-star is not something I don't recommend. It's just because it's a book I would not necessarily reread, and there were a couple things in the story that just didn't necessarily like get me attached to the book, if that makes sense. That was that. After that, I read a book on Fable, and now let me explain to you exactly what the ordeal was. I had the chance to read on Fable an advanced reader's copy of Julie Soto's upcoming debut, Forget Me Not. I got the chance to read this because I do work at Fable. The publisher and Julie have been working with Fable for the past couple of weeks, I believe, and they organized this advanced readers club where a bunch of people were selected to join a club with Julie and her publishing team. And so we got the ebook version of the book and we got to read it all together on Fable. That is one of the main features of Fable, is that you can create book clubs, but you can also read with your club in the same ebook. And so we could annotate together, we could put our reactions, and we got to interact with the publishing team. And it was just an amazing experience overall. Like, not even taking in consideration how good the book was, the experience itself was so fun, so great. But now for the actual book, Forget Me Not is easily in my top 10 books of 2023, and it's only February. Let me tell you why. Imagine if the movie The Wedding Planner and I Hate Valentine's Day had a baby, and then sprinkle in some of Julie Soto's well-beloved writing. If you don't know, she is a very well-known fanfic writer for Hermione and Draco from Harry Potter. And so you mix in that angst, that enemies to lovers, that tension, that inevitable chemistry, and bring it all together with the vibes of the Wedding Planner and I Hate Valentine's Day, and it's just fantastic. So Emma, the main female character, is a wedding planner, and then Elliot is a florist. Elliot is the main male character. Elliot is a grump, Emma is a sunshine, and so they worked together on some weddings a while back. There was such intense chemistry between the two, so obviously they ended up together. So they dated a couple years in the past. In the book we get like present and past point of views, and so they dated, and then something happened where they broke up, and you will have to read to know what that is because it's not in the blurb, so I'm not going to tell you. So they break up, and a couple years after that, Emma gets this huge wedding between a really popular influencer and her future wife. So she gets this contract, but the two brides absolutely want to be married in this rose garden, which can only be like, the venue can only be with specific florists, and that florist is Elliot. And so it's either she declines the wedding, which she obviously cannot do because it's such a big deal, and she just started her own wedding business after working for a really mean but popular wedding planner, and so she really needs all that commotion and that free promo, so she agrees. And Elliot, when they meet again, they're like super, you know, it's like the North Pole between these two. It is cold, they don't interact, but you continue the story again, having present point of view and the past, and seeing how Elliot and Emma kind of got together and how it came to be. You see how in the present, as the two advance in a work relationship only, you come to see how they've regretted certain things from how their relationship was in the past. And this book was hilarious. It was also super sweet. It was incredibly entertaining. Like, I haven't read a lot of romances where I would just read it for the plot. I'm gonna be honest, there are only like, there's a handful of like purely romance books that if there wasn't any romance, I would still read them for the plot. There's only a few of those, and this is one of them. I just love the wedding planner setting thing, so I rated it 5 stars. That entire book owns my heart, and I will be getting a tattoo for it. It was just, I couldn't put it down. Like, I mean, I was reading on my phone, so I couldn't put my phone down. But her writing in Forget Me Not is so funny, yet it's still meaningful and also very authentic. And I really love that about it. Plus, I also got to interview Julie. I want to tell you, I fangirled so hard. Again, this was an opportunity that I got through my job at Fable. I work on the editorial team, so I got to interview her and get some, you know, some background details on about certain scenes in the book. And so when I was reading, I was just like, oh my god, she explained, she talked about this, she talked about that. And I did write a blog post based on the interview and just a couple fun facts to get you excited for the book. So I will link that in the description if you're interested in learning a little bit more about Julie and learning a little bit more about her book. And also if you're just interested in supporting me, you know, I'll put it there. Such a good book, truly. I cannot wait for it to come out in July. You guys have to pre-order it. You have to get it. You have to read it. Such a good book. Mwah! Loved it. And then the very last book that I read in February was actually a book that my TBR jar chose for me, and that was If Cats Disappeared from the World. I was actually really glad when I pulled out this title because I'd been wanting to read some more Japanese literature and I just never actually chose them. So when my TBR jar was like, you have to read this, I read it, and I bawled my eyes out at the end. So this is not necessarily a book about cats. Basically, the main character is living alone. His mother passed away 4 years ago. He's not in touch with his father, so he's living alone with his cat, Cabbage. And one day he goes to the doctors because he hasn't been feeling very well. He gets a diagnosis and he only has months to live, if not weeks. And so he starts to think, like, did my life have any meaning? Did I do everything I wanted? Am I gonna die feeling fulfilled? You know, like, did I do what I came on this earth to do? That whole, like, existential crisis type thing. And then one day, very soon after that doctor's appointment, the devil shows up with a deal. If he chooses something to disappear from the world, he will have another day on earth. And so that's how it starts off. He's like, do I want to make this deal with the devil? He makes the deal. And so that's kind of how the story goes. It's like, okay, first thing that's gonna disappear, this. Okay, he gets an extra day. Towards the end, the devil proposes that cats disappear from the world. I swear, if he had said yes, I would have ripped the book in two. How could you get rid of cats? But anyways, when we get to this point in the book, you really, really come to see the relationship that the postman had with his mother and with his father, and the whole family connection in here. And then it's just, oh, like, after that point of, like, a world without cats, that entire chapter, I was sobbing. So I rated this 4 stars. I would reread parts of it just to have, like, that flow of emotion. The writing is very simple, but I feel like that is often the case when a book is translated. So this was translated from Japanese to English, right? And I feel like the way that Japanese directly translates to English is a rather simplified version of what most of us who read in English would be used to. So don't go in expecting like something super, I can't even think of the word, like don't expect like amazing prose or anything like that. It's been translated, so that's a factor to keep in mind. But the meaning of the words, that though, you might get emotional through this, because I do really get the whole thing about, like, have I done what I came on this earth to do? Like that whole big question about, like, why am I here? What is it I want to do? Like, have I done everything I wanted in life? Am I living my life to the fullest? I've been dealing with that whole mindset for a couple months now. So this really hit home It did make me realize a couple things, or rather it enhanced stuff that I always knew, but that I recently started paying more attention to. And I read this, loved it. I do recommend it. Plus it's a very short book, so it can help get your reading count up, and it has a very nice message as well. I've gone through them all. Phew! Hopefully this video is not too long. I know my reading wrap-ups are often pretty long, but that's just because I can't just say like 4 stars, here are the tropes, that's it. I have to talk about it. I hope you got some recs in here. If you've read any of these, please let me know. If you have any recommendations similar to these, again, feel free to let me know. The comment section is an open place to recommend and find new books, always and forever. I'm very grateful that I did have such a good reading month. I hope that March is just as good, but I do hope you enjoyed the reading wrap-up. And as always, thank you so much for taking some time in your day to watch my content. It genuinely does mean the world to me to see that people are watching and interacting, and that I can bring some comfort or some, you know, entertainment to people's lives. It makes my heart very full. If you did like the video, feel free to leave a thumbs up. It's a great way to support. It helps our family grow. Speaking of, if you want to join the little Raindrops family, make sure to subscribe if you aren't already. And with that, I will let you go because this is already a long video, so I don't need to blubber on and on and on and on for the outro. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.